Have you ever trusted someone so much that you'd do anything for them? What if that person was your own child, and they betrayed you in the worst way possible? Stay with me until the end of this story, and you'll see how one woman turned her darkest day into her greatest victory. My name is Margaret, and I'm going to tell you about the day my life fell apart and how I put it back together again. On my 62nd birthday, I woke up feeling excited. I live by myself in a small house in Ohio. My son Brandon hadn't called much lately, but I thought surely he'd remember my special day. I made pancakes, his favorite breakfast since he was little. I set 2 plates on the table and waited. Hours passed. No call, no visit. My heart felt heavy, but I didn't give up hope. Finally, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. There stood Brandon with a small bunch of flowers from the grocery store. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said with a smile. "Get ready. I made lunch plans for us." I was so happy. I put on my nicest sweater and good shoes. And as we drove, something felt wrong. We weren't going to any restaurant. Instead, we pulled up to a big building with a sign that read, "Willow Pine Senior Home." "Brandon, what's happening?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. "You can't live alone anymore. You forget things. This place is safe. You'll have people to talk to and activities to do." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're joking, right?" "It's my birthday." But he wasn't joking. He got out and opened the trunk. Inside was my suitcase, already packed with my things. "You went through my stuff and packed for me." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Inside the building, everything smelled like cleaning products and old vegetables. Brandon handed papers to the lady at the front desk. He had already signed documents to take control of my life. They took me to a small room with boring beige walls and a window that looked at a brick wall. This was my birthday present, being put away like an old piece of furniture. I sat on the bed, still wearing my coat, feeling colder than I'd ever felt before. No birthday cake, no candles, just silence and sadness. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times I'd helped Brandon. I'd given him money when he needed it. I'd made excuses for him when he let people down. I'd loved him with everything I had. But now I realized something terrible. He didn't put me here because he cared. He put me here to hide me away. The next morning, I asked a nurse for my phone. She told me Brandon had taken care of it. He turned it off. He said I got too confused by technology. That's when I understood the truth. I wasn't here to be helped. I was here to be erased, to be forgotten. And if I didn't find a way out, they would succeed. But I'm stronger than Brandon thought. Much stronger. For 2 days, I barely ate anything. Not because I was trying to prove a point, but because I felt too sick and sad to swallow food. Being treated like you don't matter anymore breaks something inside you. I'd raised a child. I'd built a home. I'd loved people deeply. Now I was just a room number on a chart. The nurses were nice, but they talked to me like I was a little kid, not a grown woman who'd lived a full life. My roommate, Doris, slept most of the day and snored at night. When she did talk, it was about family members who never visited anymore. I listened because I knew exactly how that loneliness felt. I tried to keep my mind busy. I watched the news. I did crossword puzzles. I read books. But I felt myself sinking into a dark place. Then, on my 4th day there, I met Ruby. Ruby was a young nurse with her hair in braids, pinned up under her work cap. She had kind eyes that really saw me. While checking my blood pressure, she said something that surprised me. "You don't belong here." I looked at her, shocked. She smiled gently. "Don't get me wrong. Lots of people need help, and that's okay. But you seem perfectly fine to me." We started talking. I told her about Brandon and what he'd done. She didn't just nod politely like most people. She really listened. Later that day, Ruby came back with something in her hand. "This belonged to Mr. Henley, who passed away last week," she whispered. "We found it in his Bible. Nobody claimed it. It was a lottery ticket, a bit yellow and wrinkled, dated from 2 weeks ago." I laughed a sad little laugh. "And you want me to check if it won anything?" She winked. "The world owes you something, doesn't it?" I didn't think much about it at first. It seemed silly. But that night, when everyone was asleep, I snuck to the old computer in the lounge. I typed in the numbers from the ticket. My hands started shaking. I read the screen again and again, not believing my eyes. $8 million. I won $8 million. Covered my mouth so I wouldn't make a sound. I looked around, but nobody was there. I didn't feel happy. I felt scared. Really, really scared. If Brandon found out about this money, what would he do? I printed the confirmation page, folded it very small, and hid it in my bra. The next day, I asked Ruby for help. "I need to talk to a lawyer," I told her. "Someone who can keep a secret." Ruby knew a lawyer named Aaron who helped elderly people for free sometimes. When he came to visit on Friday, we met in a small private room. I showed him the lottery confirmation and whispered, "Can you help me disappear?" His eyebrows went up, but he stayed calm. "We'll need to work fast," he said. Over the next few hours, Aaron helped me with lots of paperwork. He set up something called a blind trust, a special way to hold money so nobody could trace it back to me. Brandon would never see a single penny. I also made a new will. This is a document that says what happens to your things when you die. I left everything to charity. Nothing for Brandon. He'd already thrown away my love. He wouldn't get my money too. Ruby hugged me the night I left. "Don't forget about us when you're free," she said softly. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I slipped out just before sunrise, wearing borrowed clothes and carrying a small bag with just the important things. They thought I was weak and confused, but I was about to become invisible and powerful. The bus ride out of Ohio took forever. It was cold and uncomfortable. I sat in the back, wearing a hood and sunglasses, holding my bag like it contained my whole life. In a way, it did. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I just knew I had to get far enough away that Brandon couldn't find me. Aaron had helped me buy a small house in the countryside of Tennessee. It was set up under the trust's name, not mine. No cameras nearby. No neighbors too close. Just enough distance between me and the life I was leaving behind. When we crossed into Kentucky, I finally took a real breath. Freedom didn't taste sweet. It tasted like metal and fear. The house was nothing fancy, just a small brick building with chipped paint and a crooked mailbox. But it had heat, clean water, and most importantly, silence. Not the kind of silence you get in a nursing home, surrounded by people who've given up. This was the kind of silence that lets you think clearly. For the next few days, I lived quietly. I cooked simple meals. I sat on the porch wrapped in an old blanket, watching leaves blow across the yard. I checked the news constantly, half expecting to see headlines about me. But there was nothing. Not yet. One morning, about a week after I'd left, someone knocked on my door. I froze. Nobody knew where I was. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I tiptoed to the window and peeked out. Just a delivery person with groceries, part of the arrangement Aaron had set up for me. Still, I couldn't shake the nervous feeling. That afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I created a fake Facebook account and searched for Brandon. There he was, smiling in his profile picture like nothing was wrong. His latest post made my blood run cold. "If anyone has seen my mother, Margaret Taylor, please contact me or the Dayton police. She's been missing for several days. We're very worried about her safety." Hundreds of people had commented, Prayers for you. You're such a good son. Hope she's found safe. I laughed until tears ran down my face. They had no idea what kind of person he really was. None of them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the fireplace, thinking about everything. I remembered all the times I'd given Brandon money. Every loan I'd made him. Every lie he'd told me. He used to say things like, "You already told me that, Mum, when I hadn't." Or, "You're forgetting more and more these days." I'd believed him. I thought something was wrong with me. I thought I was getting old and losing my memory, but I wasn't. He wanted me to doubt myself. That way, when he took control of my life, I wouldn't fight back. I was done being controlled. The next morning, I called Aaron from a special phone that couldn't be traced. "I need to update my will again," I said. "What changes?" He asked. "I want to make it crystal clear. Brandon Taylor gets absolutely nothing. Not $1. Not one keepsake. Nothing." "Done," Aaron said. "You're safe now, Margaret." But I wasn't safe. Not yet. Because deep down, I knew Brandon wouldn't give up that easily. Then one day, a letter arrived. Plain envelope. No return address. Inside was a copy of a document. A loan paper with my signature on it. Or at least, it looked like my signature. The document was dated 12 years ago. It showed that my late husband Richard and I had borrowed $50,000. But I'd never signed that paper. Never even seen it before. I pulled out my old financial files that Aaron had helped me save. Inside, I found 3 more forms. All with forged signatures that looked like mine. My hands shook as I realized the truth. Brandon had been stealing from Richard and me for years. That's why we'd suddenly had less money. That's why Richard had seemed worried all the time before he died. That's why we couldn't take vacations anymore. I'd blamed bad luck, bad investments, getting older. But it was Brandon. All along. Over the next 3 days, I became a detective. I searched through every old document I had. I requested records from our old bank. Piece by piece, I put together the puzzle. Brandon had created fake loan documents using Richard's social security number and mine. The amounts were huge, some over $50,000. Richard must have paid most of them back before he died, carrying the shame alone. But one account was still active, and it showed I owed over $75,000. It had gone bad just 3 months before. Brandon dropped me at Willow Pines. Now I understood. He wasn't just a bad son. He was a criminal. I called Aaron again. "I have new information. Forged documents. Stolen money. Brandon did it all." "I believe you," Aaron said calmly. "Do you want to press charges with the police?" "Not yet," I said. I wanted Brandon to feel scared first. I wanted him to wonder if I knew. Because I wasn't hiding anymore. I was hunting. I gathered every document I could find. Every old email. Every bank statement. I even contacted our old bank with Aaron's help and requested all the records they had. I discovered something even worse. Brandon had used the small catering business Richard and I had started in the 1980s to get a huge loan. He'd signed Richard's name on the paperwork. 2 years after Richard had died. That wasn't just wrong. That was a serious crime. I saved everything to a computer folder and backed it up. I printed copies and stored them in my special fireproof box under the floorboards. I wasn't sure how much time I had. If Brandon suspected, I had money, and especially if he knew about the $8 million, he'd come for me soon. Have you ever looked at someone you loved your whole life and realized you never really knew them? That's how I felt. I spent hours looking through pages and pages of documents that showed Brandon's trail of lies. The little boy I used to rock to sleep had grown into a stranger. And not just any stranger, a dangerous one. With Aaron's help, I found something in a public database that made my stomach turn. Brandon Taylor was under federal investigation for fraudulent tax filings, stealing money, and something called identity misuse. Identity misuse. That hit me hardest. I clicked on the case file, my hands shaking. The details were mostly hidden, but the accusations were clear. Brandon had been creating false identities, lying about incomes, and submitting fake tax returns to steal money from the government. Some of those fake identities were dead people. Some were elderly people. And some were real people, including me. The IRS, which collects taxes, had flagged several tax returns filed in my name over the past 3 years. I had no idea he'd been doing this. I stared at the screen, my mind spinning. Had he always planned to take my money? Was that why he was so quick to put me in a facility and take my phone away? He didn't want me to find out what he'd done. I stood up and paced around my small living room, one hand on my chest, trying to calm down. My own son had used my name as a tool for his crimes. And when things got dangerous for him, he'd planned to lock me away like a problem he needed to hide. But now I wasn't just a problem. I was the one who could stop him. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Instead, I started documenting everything. Every lie. Every stolen dollar. Every forged signature. I printed documents and put them in folders organized by date. I made audio recordings of myself explaining what I'd found. Not because I was afraid of forgetting, but because I wanted my voice to be heard if anything happened to me. Then I made an important decision. I mailed a copy of all the evidence anonymously to the Department of Justice, the government agency that investigates serious crimes. I didn't want to make a big statement yet, but I wanted them to have the proof. If something ever happened to me, they'd know where to look. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Brandon knew something. I started noticing cars parked near my house for longer than normal. Once, a man knocked on my door saying he was doing a neighborhood survey. I didn't open the door. I just watched from behind the curtain, phone in my hand, ready to call for help. Every knock and every ring made me jump. But I didn't run. Not this time. I called Aaron again. We need to make everything official, I told him. The trust, the will, everything. I want it all protected. He agreed. We set everything up in my new name with lots of legal protection. If Brandon ever tried to claim he deserved my money, every court in the country would turn him away. But even with all this protection on paper, the emotional pain hit me in quiet moments. I'd sit at night and remember Brandon as a little boy. His laugh, his scraped knees, the way he used to fall asleep on my chest. I remembered the teenage years when things got harder, but I never gave up on him. The college phone calls, the growing silence, the increasing distance. How did I miss all the warning signs? How long had he been slipping away while I kept holding on? Maybe that's the worst kind of betrayal. The one you watch happen slowly, always hoping it's something else, always believing love will be enough. But now I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to let Brandon write the end of my story. Because for the first time in my life, I was in control. Then came the letter. Plain white envelope. No return address. But the handwriting was Brandon's, sharp and messy. Like even his pen was in a hurry. Inside was just one sentence. I know what you did, and this isn't over. I read it twice, 3 times. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so typical of Brandon. No, I miss you. No, where are you? Just a threat. I folded the letter carefully and put it with all my other evidence. By now, I'd been gone almost 3 weeks. Brandon had started a big public campaign, going on local news stations and social media, pretending to be a worried son searching for his confused mother. It would have been funny if it weren't so scary, Then he made his next move. An official letter arrived from the courthouse in Dayton. I signed for it with shaking hands and sat down at my kitchen table to read it. Brandon had filed legal papers to have me declared mentally incompetent, meaning not able to think clearly or make decisions for myself. I couldn't breathe. The document included statements from two people claiming I'd been acting confused and strange. One was an old neighbor. The other was Brandon's college friend, someone I barely knew. Brandon's lawyer had also submitted recordings, pieces of old voicemail messages I'd left when I was upset or lonely. They'd been cut and rearranged to make me sound unstable and confused. He even attached a letter from a psychiatrist I'd never met, claiming to be worried about my disappearing and paranoid behavior. They wanted the court to freeze my bank accounts, take control of the trust, and drag me back to that nursing home. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Aaron came that same night. He read everything, his face serious. "We've got work to do," he finally said. "But Margaret, you need to stay calm. You need to stay sharp. They're counting on you to panic." I nodded, too numb to cry. Part 11. Fighting back the next few days moved like a storm. Aaron brought in another lawyer to help us prepare. We gathered documents, video call records, financial logs, everything to prove I'd been thinking clearly every single day since I left. We scheduled an independent psychiatric evaluation. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Levine, came to my house and spent 3 hours with me. She asked about my childhood, my late husband, and Brandon. I told her everything. She didn't pity me. She listened. She asked real questions. When she left, she touched my hand and said, "You're one of the most clear-thinking people I've seen this week." It felt like I could breathe again for the first time in days. But the pressure kept building. News of the court hearing leaked out. The internet, which had briefly felt sorry for Brandon's missing mother, began to change. People started asking questions. Why hadn't I contacted anyone? Was I really confused? Was someone else controlling me? The media loves a mystery, and Brandon knew how to feed them one. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because now I had more than just proof. I had a purpose. In the quiet of my small home, I started recording a video statement. I didn't share it yet, but I wanted to be ready in case they tried to silence me. I looked into the camera and said, "My name is Margaret Taylor. I am of sound mind, and I was betrayed by the person I trusted most." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just told the truth, because I knew what was coming. And this time, I wouldn't be the one on trial. The courthouse in Dayton looked the same as I remembered, but I wasn't the same person who'd been there years ago. Back then, I was someone who believed in second chances. Now I was someone fighting for my freedom. Aaron had told me to dress simply but confidently. I wore a navy blue coat with silver buttons, my husband's old watch, and sensible heels that clicked firmly with each step through the courthouse halls. Brandon was already there when I arrived. He stood up as I entered, putting on a performance. He had a mask of concern on his face. He even smiled, the kind that strangers would think was warm. But I saw it for what it really was. He was here to bury me. The judge, an older man with tired eyes, began the hearing. In the matter of Margaret Taylor's mental competency, the words hung in the air like smoke. Brandon's lawyer went first, a tall man with a smooth voice and too much confidence. He laid out his case like a rehearsed script. Margaret had gone missing. Margaret was behaving strangely. Margaret was possibly being manipulated. Margaret was a danger to herself and her money. He introduced the psychiatrist's letter from the doctor I'd never met. He played those audio clips of me, cut and arranged to make me sound confused and unstable. I listened to myself sound scattered and desperate. completely out of context. I saw the judge's eyebrows rise. My hands gripped the armrest tightly. Then Brandon spoke. "Your Honor," he said, his voice shaking just the right amount. "I love my mother. I really do. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I believe she's being taken advantage of. She's not herself. She's lost." That's when I stood up. "My turn, Your Honor." The judge nodded. I walked slowly to the stand, pausing just enough to let everyone notice I was there. Then I spoke clearly and calmly. "My name is Margaret Taylor. I am 62 years old. I am not mentally impaired. I am not lost. And I am not anyone's victim." I opened my folder carefully and handed a copy of Dr. Levine's full psychiatric report to the judge. It was signed, dated, and certified. The conclusion: completely sound mind, no signs of memory problems, emotionally stable. I watched Brandon's lawyer tense up. Brandon's face twitched. Then I continued. "I have here," I said, lifting a second folder, "a record of every phone call I made the week before I left, receipts for the money transfer to a legal trust, medical records all clean, and a signed statement from the attorney who helped me leave the facility, stating I was clear-headed, logical, and in full control of my decisions." I paused. "I also have something else, but I won't be presenting that today. Not unless I need to." I didn't show them the file with every fraudulent signature, every stolen loan, every fake tax document Brandon had ever touched. That was my ace in the hole. Instead, I turned to the judge. He put me in a facility without my permission, took my phone, took my freedom, and now he wants to take what little I have left, my voice, my independence, my dignity. Please don't let him. The courtroom was completely still. The judge leaned back, tapping his fingers on the file. "I need time to review all documents and the medical evaluation. The court will meet again in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. As the session ended, Brandon turned toward me. He tried to catch my eye, but I didn't give him the satisfaction. He left with clenched fists and a tight jaw. His mask was cracking, and I walked out with my head high. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, I knew I could win. 2 weeks. That's how long the judge gave us. But Brandon didn't waste a single day. Within hours of leaving the courthouse, he went on the attack. The local news ran a new segment. "Missing mother reappears in court. Son fears she's being controlled." Brandon spoke directly to the camera, his eyes wet, his voice shaking. "I just want to make sure my mother is safe. She's been through a lot. She's not thinking clearly, and I'm afraid there are bad people around her." I watched from my living room, arms folded, jaw tight. There were no bad people around me. Just me. Just Margaret Taylor. The woman who'd raised him, sacrificed for him, and forgiven him too many times. And he had the nerve to paint me as someone being tricked. That was the moment I knew. The quiet battle I'd been fighting in my heart wasn't enough anymore. I needed to act. I called Aaron and handed him the sealed envelope with every document I had collected, the forged loans, the fake signatures, the tax returns Brandon had filed using my name. "Send it," I said. "Not to the court. To the Department of Justice. Anonymously." He looked through the pages and nodded. "This will definitely get their attention. I'm counting on it." But I wasn't finished. That night, using one of my new secret accounts, I made a big donation, $5 million, to a national organization that protects elderly people from financial abuse. No name attached, just the money transfer. Within a week, they launched a campaign. They didn't name me, but the timing was perfect. People started asking questions, sharing posts, commenting. How does a mother disappear, then come back with money, but her own son tries to lock her away? Something's wrong with this son. Why hasn't anyone asked for her side of the story? I don't trust him. Brandon's carefully built image started to crack. Then something unexpected happened. A journalist from a major newspaper contacted Aaron. She wanted to hear my side. She promised to be careful with the details. No full names, no photos. Just truth. I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe 2 towns over. I wore sunglasses and a hat. We sat in the back corner. She hit record and let me talk. I told her about the nursing home. About being dropped there on my birthday without warning. About Brandon taking my phone and my bank accounts. About him stealing my dignity. I didn't mention the lottery money. Not yet. When she asked about the court case, I simply said, "He's trying to take control of my life. Again." The story ran too. Days later, Mother or Millionaire, the silencing of Margaret T. People online began connecting the dots. Was the missing mother actually the anonymous donor? Was this why her son wanted her declared incompetent? More whispers, more doubts, more questions. And still, I stayed quiet. Because Brandon's downfall wouldn't come from an accusation. It would come from the truth catching up with him. 2 days before the court was supposed to meet again, Aaron received a call. It was from the Department of Justice. They'd received our anonymous file, and they were opening an investigation. Brandon didn't know it yet, that while he was building a castle of lies in courtrooms and on TV, I was setting fire to the foundation, and the flames were getting higher. The second court hearing felt different. Colder. Not because of the weather, but because something had changed. Brandon walked into the courtroom looking less confident. His shoulders weren't as straight. His lawyer whispered urgently to him as they sat down. They'd seen the article. They'd seen the shift in public opinion. They were feeling the cracks in their story. I sat calmly, my folder of documents in my lap. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that cuts clean and precise. This time, we went first. Aaron stood and spoke clearly. "Your Honor, since the last hearing, we've completed a full independent psychiatric evaluation, submitted detailed financial records proving Mrs. Taylor's independence and clear thinking, and have discovered through public records that the person filing this petition, Mr. Brandon Taylor, is currently under federal investigation for multiple financial crimes, including identity theft and tax fraud." He handed the judge a copy of the public case information. Brandon's attorney jumped up, protesting. "That investigation has nothing to do with..." The judge held up his hand. "Sit down." The courtroom went silent. Then Dr. Levine, my independent evaluator, took the stand. She was calm, intelligent, and direct. She confirmed that I was not only mentally able, but emotionally stable and fully aware of my decisions, including my choice to leave the nursing home. "She's not just clear-minded," Dr. Levine said. "She's thoughtful and deliberate. There is no medical reason for any declaration of incompetence." I looked at Brandon. His hands gripped the table so tightly his knuckles were white. His mask, that carefully built image of concern, was falling apart. Aaron then presented our final piece of evidence. A timeline. It showed exactly when Brandon tried to take control of my bank accounts, and how it perfectly matched with the time he was making large withdrawals from his own failing business. Coincidence? Hardly. The judge reviewed everything in silence. Then Brandon was given a chance to respond. He stood, his voice cracking. "My mother is sick. She's clearly being manipulated by someone. She wouldn't act like this unless she was confused or unstable. This isn't her." I stood then. I faced him directly. "I am her," I said clearly. Everyone went completely still. "I am the woman who stayed up with you when you were sick at age 6, who gave up vacations to pay for your college, who cooked your favorite meals even when I could barely afford food for myself. I am her. And you left me in that facility like I was nothing. I turned to the judge. And now, Your Honor, I ask you to let me prove that I am not nothing. The judge leaned forward and spoke slowly. Mrs. Taylor, based on the overwhelming evidence provided, your psychiatric evaluation, and the inconsistencies in Mr. Taylor's claims, I am dismissing this case. Your financial accounts and personal independence are fully restored. This court recognizes you as competent and independent. I didn't cry, but my hands shook slightly as I picked up my papers and walked out. Brandon didn't say a word as I passed. His eyes were wild, not with anger, but with fear. He knew it was over. At least this part. But what he didn't know was that while he'd spent weeks trying to prove I was unstable, I'd been building something far more powerful than just a defense. I was building a legacy, and I wasn't done yet. The phone call came just after midnight. Aaron's voice was serious but steady. It happened. The Department of Justice opened formal proceedings. Brandon's name is on the official docket. I didn't speak. I just sat there in the dark, staring out at the trees swaying in the wind beyond my window. Part of me had been waiting for this moment. But now that it had come, it didn't feel like victory. It felt inevitable. The next morning, the world caught up. The media went crazy. Brandon Taylor, son from recent elder abuse case under federal investigation. My name wasn't mentioned directly, but the connections were obvious. People remembered the missing mother, the court battle, the anonymous donor, the strong woman who disappeared but stood firm in court weeks later. Now their perfect son was unraveling. And they wanted to hear from me. I stayed quiet for 2 days. Turned off the TV. Ignored the phone. I cooked breakfast, watched birds in the yard, and sat with a pen, writing letters I'd never send. But silence wasn't justice. It was time to speak. I reached out to Sarah, the journalist who'd interviewed me secretly before. I told her I was ready to speak again, this time on camera. No fake names. No more shadows. We scheduled the interview for the following Friday. National news. Full feature. She asked if I was sure. I've never been more sure, I said. On the day of the interview, I dressed simply. Grey sweater. Small silver earrings. No makeup, no stylist. Just truth. We sat across from each other in a quiet studio with soft, warm lights. Sarah leaned forward. Margaret, the world knows the headlines. They've read about Brandon and the court case. But what they don't know is the heart of it. Why speak out now? I looked directly into the camera. Because it's not just about me, I said. It's about every parent who gave everything and was thrown away. Every older adult dismissed, erased, or locked up under the excuse of love. I was almost one of them. And I won't be quiet anymore. Then I told my whole story. The nursing home. The lottery ticket. The lies I uncovered. The file I sent to the government. I left out nothing. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as I spoke. But I didn't cry. I was done crying. That night, the interview aired. Millions of people watched. Messages poured in from across the country. People sharing their own stories of betrayal, abandonment, and survival. I wasn't just Margaret anymore. I was a mirror, showing people they weren't alone. Brandon didn't speak publicly, but sources said he was devastated. That his life was falling apart. Good. He'd built that life on lies, and now it was collapsing under the weight of his own cruelty. But I didn't gloat. Instead, I got to work. I made plans to launch a foundation, one that would protect elderly people from legal and financial abuse. Not just in name, but with real legal support, real money, real help. I named it the Margaret Project. Because if they were going to use my name to try to strip away my dignity, I was going to use it to give dignity back to others. Still, the pain stayed with me. Not because Brandon was suffering, but because I'd once loved him with a loyalty that made me blind. Now, I had to learn how to live without that illusion. But I had something better. I had the truth. And nobody could take that from me again. Brandon's arrest didn't come with sirens and flashing lights. It came with headlines. Brandon Taylor indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. I read the news on a quiet morning with my tea and my cat beside me. The house was still except for the hum of the refrigerator and the wind brushing the shutters. For a long time, I just stared at the article. Not because I didn't believe it. I did. But because I'd imagined this moment so many times that when it finally came, it felt like déjà vu. He was out on bail, of course. Money can buy time, even if it can't buy peace. But the damage was done. His name had become associated with betrayal. Former clients left him. His credit lines were frozen. Friends disappear.